That was the last time that Michael was regent. That was the last time that he was the archangel that was guiding human evolution. This was the time of Alexander the Great. Archangel Michael worked overlighting Alexander and Aristotle. Who was Alexander's teacher? Aristotle. Who was Aristotle's teacher? Plato. Who was Plato's teacher? Socrates. To make a comment for perspective's sake, Alfred North Whitehead, British philosopher, earlier part of the 19th century, summed things up and said, all of philosophic thought in the Western civilization since Plato and Aristotle and Socrates is like a footnote to what they did. Here we are talking about a light of consciousness that was unfolding at this time that was an example, if you will. When we talk about Greek culture and civilization, and I'm just using Plato and Aristotle and Socrates as an example, we could go through every area, whether we speak of natural science, whether we speak of architecture, whether we speak of music, we could go on and on about Greek culture and civilization. What I forgot to mention in that Greco-Roman Ayres age, that aspect of human consciousness that was being unfolded in this Greco-Roman period is esoterically what is known as the intellectual soul. This was the first time that humanity started to unfold intellect, which has to do with the mind, to where it is able to discriminate and perceive and think. These seeds were being planted. When we talk about Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, this will be subject for other time, but they were all initiates, meaning that they'd all been initiated into the mystery schools. Their consciousness was completely different. They were advanced beings. They were accelerated. When we talk about initiation, initiation has been part of human evolution from the beginning of time. To give you just a quick idea, when we talk about initiation and Greek initiation, and there were many, many different mystery schools. These were of Eleusis. There were others too, Samothrace and various others that were very significant. One of the things that was involved in all initiation, you were chosen. You didn't sign up. You were chosen by the masters as to whether you were going to be a pupil for initiation or not. And that was usually in childhood, when someone was about 7 to 10 years old. Then you lived within the mystery precincts, and you were trained and cultivated until the master felt that you were ready for initiation. And what initiation involved, and I'm being extremely brief, is to give us an idea. The individual is put into what is called a 3-day temple sleep. They were put into a state of near death, to where the higher spiritual bodies were actually withdrawn from the physical body. They were just still connected at the heel, so that there was still life to the physical, because if those subtle bodies had been taken away, the person would die. And that was one of the dangers of initiation. What happened was the individual's subtle bodies were released to go into the spiritual worlds consciously. They were taken through all the dimensions of creation. They greeted and were met by all of the spiritual hierarchies, and all the wisdom of creation and of the divine plan was directly experienced by them. And then they came back into their bodies after 3 days. And they came out of that 3-day temple sleep with all of this knowledge. They were what were known as initiates, and they were in a whole different state of consciousness than the regular people. Now initiation we have to do to ourselves. That doesn't work anymore. It's a technique. It doesn't work anymore, and it's atavistic at this point. It has to be done consciously by ourselves. It can't be done unconsciously. Why do they call it sleep? Because it was an unconscious process. It's to give us an idea that the culture of ancient Greece, with the unfoldment of the intellectual soul, we are going to see the flowering of humanity in a cultural way that's mind-boggling. If we really compare, and this is why I'm mentioning it, because it's a very, very illuminating study, if you choose to do it, is to go back and actually read and study about Alexander the Great and Aristotle, his teacher, who was an initiate, and he inculcated into Alexander all of this cosmic wisdom and all of the understanding of what was to unfold in terms of that phase of human evolution of which he was a participant back 2,160 years ago, which was the intellectual soul. He also knew he had a sense of mission, and he was told, for them it was Apollo, the spirit of the sun, that Michael was. That he, working with Michael, was preparing humanity, human consciousness, human culture, to receive the cosmic Christ, to receive this being from the central sun into human evolution. In order to do that, so that mankind was in some state of awareness and some semblance of ability to understand the significance of what was going to take place, it required a culture and civilization of very high level that was unified and harmonious. When we get into Alexander the Great's conquests, guy's mind-boggling. He started winning battles at age 18. He never in his entire life lost a single battle. He conquered the known world in 10 years, which was Greece, North Africa, Egypt, everything that we know from Israel and Syria, Iraq, Mesopotamia, Babylonia, Persia, what we know of as Pakistan and India. In 10 years, he died at age 32. This is just mind-boggling. This was a special being. And the masters speak of Alexander the Great. He was an instrument of the light. He was an instrument of Michael. And he was the instrument of preparing humanity for the Christ event, which was the pivotal event. And it was Michael that overlighted this civilization, which in a practical way, if we look at it historically, was one where the world became unified. Here we had all these kingdoms. We got a common language, which was Greek. Greek became the language of knowledge and of culture. What language is the New Testament written in? Greek. Here's a Jew. The fulfillment, the Messiah of the Jewish tradition of Judaism. You'd think that it would be written in Hebrew. It isn't written in Hebrew. It's written in Greek. As was everything of knowledge. Coinage was created with all of Alexander's conquests. He came into ownership of all these huge treasuries of all these kingdoms where the kings were sitting on all these treasuries. He started minting all the gold and silver and putting it into circulation to pay his armies and to build cities. He created a whole new economy that had a shared coinage and currency, created markets, the beginning of capitalism, opened up the trade routes between all these different areas of the world that hadn't been communicating with each other and didn't even know they existed. When he was conquering India, he thought when he crossed the Hindu Kush and went into the Indus Valley, as far as Greek knowledge, this was supposed to be the end of the world. There was supposed to be an ocean there. He found out there's tons more. So he stopped. His army went down the Indus Valley. They conquered all that, went back up through Persia. The whole time he was doing his conquest, he was sending back to Aristotle caravans full of exotic plants and animals and all the stuff that he was finding in these worlds that Greeks had never been in order to expand Greek knowledge about the world. And sending back all of this stuff. Aristotle's back in Greece and he's getting all of this stuff. There was an enlivening of knowledge and of exploration and wanting to know and understand. And this is the time of the city of Alexandria and the Alexandrian Library, which was preeminently the storehouse of knowledge of the ancient world that was unparalleled. Athens became such a center of culture, this entire city became a university town. People from all over the world came to Athens in order to gain the knowledge and wisdom of the Greek culture. As odd as it may sound, because Alexander was a conqueror, what was created as a result of his conquest was a world of freedom. Because the Greek city-state was the prototype, and the Greek city-state was that of freedom. There were Greek city-states being built all over as a result of the conquest, because that was part of how they actually were able to manage the empire. And then we find that the Greek culture started spreading from India, Persia, Pakistan, Iran, Iraq, all of these places. Egypt, North Africa. What was created? This was Michael's last regency. When we talk about globalization, when we talk about a common currency, when we talk about a shared language, when we talk about exploration and knowledge, one of the things to understand in a symbolic way is think of the space program and landing on the moon as outer, yet anything outer is mirroring that which is inner. It's a cosmic law. What is the moon? It's the soul. If we speak spiritually, the moon is the soul. What does it mean in a metaphoric sense, and even deeper than that, as to mankind's landing on the moon? What does it mean in terms of us sending space probes out into our solar system and out into the cosmos. What does it mean in terms of the Hubble telescope and the ability to see deeply into the cosmos in a way we've never seen before? We're talking about an expansion of consciousness, cosmic consciousness. And that's exactly what the Christ being embodies, and that's exactly what Michael is the emissary of. It's very fruitful to go back and study previous influences of regency and rulership of any of these archangels. To really understand what happens in the physical, we have to understand what is happening in the spiritual. One of the important points to understand is when an archangel has completed its regency and its rulership of evolution, then it has to retire to its home base, or its planet specifically. At the end of Michael's regency, he had to retire to the sun. Anything that's physical is an outer veil for that which is spiritual. If we wanted to really understand the spiritual worlds, the way that they were presented by the ancient astronomers before Copernicus were actually correct in a very real sense. They were looking at the solar system and the cosmos from the standpoint of the inner exploration of soul and spirit as opposed to the outer looking at it through a telescope. When we see the Earth, then there's the moon, and then there's Mercury, and then there's Venus, and then there's the sun, and then there's Mars, and then there's Jupiter, and then there's Saturn. Modern astronomer looks through there and says, that's Earth-centered. It's geocentric, not heliocentric. It isn't correct. We are not the center of the solar system. The sun is. That's true on a physical level, but it's not true on a spiritual level. We're going to find that what I just described, that ascension process, is the actual layering of the dimensional realities of the spiritual worlds that we go through initiation and the expansion of consciousness, or at that time when we die and we go through the spiritual worlds. The difference between dying and initiation is that when you die, you ascend through the spiritual worlds, and that's what you're doing because you're in this phase of life between death and rebirth. When you're being initiated into that, you are still living in a body, experiencing the same reality, ascending through these spiritual realities. So when we start talking about the sun, in the Vedic tradition, this is known as Devachan. Devachan means the heaven worlds, the worlds of the gods. You want to understand that there's 7-dimensional realities to every one of these dimensions, as we've talked about in previous classes. So there's 7 levels of dimensional reality to the sun. You've heard of the term seventh heaven. It's the highest heaven. It's not just a phrase, it's a reality. You ascend step by step. Any of you read Dante's Divine Comedy? Because he lays all this out. This is the path that Dante goes in terms of the Divine Comedy. It's quite accurate, and it's not some myth. It's quite real. So Michael retired to the sun. This was his base of power. This was his home. The Christ being that we've talked about, the Logos, the cosmic intelligence, had through vast cosmic periods of time been in a process of descending from the central spiritual sun, which is not our physical sun. It's the central sun of the whole creation, the spiritual sun that is the basis and foundation for the whole creation. The Christ being had been descending through the dimensional realities of creation, through vast periods of time, until it actually entered the sun, our sun. The first human being who actually saw this was Zoroaster. This was in the second post-Atlantean epoch, that Persian post-Atlantean epoch. The name Ahura Mazda means that one in the aura of the sun. And it was Ahura Mazda that Zoroaster saw. He actually saw the process of the Christ being entering into our physical sun from those higher dimensional realities. Does anyone have any idea who Zoroaster was in a later incarnation? Jesus. Jesus. We're looking at a previous incarnation of Jesus who ends up being the host for the Christ 2,000 years ago, was Zoroaster in a previous lifetime, the individual who established Zoroastrianism. And we're going to find that the connection between this Master Jesus, because he's an ascended master now, and the relationship with the Christ being goes way, way, way back. It had to do with them working together in all kinds of ways and realities through vast periods of time. That was Jesus' last incarnation as Jesus, and he is an ascended master. He never reincarnates again. That was pretty magnificent last lifetime. We're talking about stuff that's way beyond avatars to the degree that people are familiar with that teaching from the Vedic tradition. When we talk about the Christ being entering into Jesus and the creation of this very unique being called Jesus the Christ. So Michael retired to the sun, and the Christ being then shortly after that descended into Jesus' body. The Christ being was residing in the sun, temporarily preparing to descend to earth and enter into human evolution. All these ancient cultures, they worship the sun. Anthropologists, they think they're sun worshipers, and they think it's some silly thing about it's the source of light and heat. And that's true, of course. Where would we be without the sun? They were seeing inside the sun. They were seeing into the spiritual sun. And they were seeing the spirit of the sun, which was the Christ. Because the Christ was in our sun for thousands of years before he actually came into humanity. All the ancient traditions knew the Christ being was coming. Not just the Hebrews. You're going to find if you go into all of these various spiritual traditions, they were all aware. They didn't know exactly when, and they didn't know exactly in what manner this being, the Christ, was going to enter into the earth and human evolution. When Michael was done with his regency, he retired to the sun. He witnessed the departure of the Christ from the sun to enter into human evolution and incarnate into Jesus. One of the results of the Christ event was that we had now come evolutionarily to the point in time humanity had to where we had to be given the freedom of thought. Michael, as the regent, the one in charge cosmically of the universal principle of creative intelligence, he had to release that creative intelligence from the sun and allow it to descend to the earth and enter into human souls. This is huge because it meant that each one of us then had the entire universal principle of creative intelligence, or the mind of God, within each and every one of us. And the cosmic consciousness to unfold, to really be able to claim and fulfill our true destiny. We'll get into that more in future classes. There were huge risks in terms of Michael releasing the cosmic intelligence from the sun and allowing it to descend to the earth and enter into humanity and human souls. Because the being of darkness, Ahriman, the being that Zoroaster saw, he saw Ahura Mazda as the being of light, and he was the first individual who actually saw his counterpart, the being of darkness, Ahriman, or what we would in Christian terminology know as the Antichrist. The home of this being cosmically is the earth. This being of darkness's home is in the inner dimensional realities of the planet Earth. It is the being of death. It is the being of materialism. It is the being of darkness and evil as we know it. And not just in terms of humanity. These are cosmic realities. These are not philosophical points or abstractions. We're talking about cosmic beings, and it's about understanding the whole cosmic drama that relates to life in the cosmos. And it is a drama of light and darkness. What happens as the sun rises? Shadows. This is the being of shadows. When you see the light rising, you're also going to see the shadows grow. And of all of the places in creation that are the basis of this darkness, it is this earth. That is the reason to also understand that one of, not the only, one of the primary things about humanity, which makes it totally unique to any other life wave of being in this whole creation, is that we were actually created, and it is our destiny, and we are the agency of the divine, to enter into the realm of darkness, take the darkness into ourselves, and transmute it into light. The earth and what's going on here with humanity is intense and heavy, and this stuff is real. That's where we get choice, because if everything is light and everything is good, what kind of choice is there? If you don't have choice, you don't have freedom. And this is the ultimate choice, because there's varying degrees of freedom within the cosmos, but not to where the ultimate light, which is the Christ being, which is here on earth, and the ultimate being of darkness is here on earth. And they're both, we can say, in their appropriate manners, because the light respects the individuality and freedom of the human being, but the darkness doesn't. The darkness doesn't play by the rules. That the human being has to choose between these forces that are right here. This cosmic battleground, this cosmic meeting ground of the most fundamental forces is right here. And it is that through this process, we transmute. It gets into deep understandings of the transformation of consciousness. Alchemy and the growth of consciousness and the transformations of consciousness are inherent within the very human being in a way as no other beings in creation. It's unbounded and unlimited, yet it's the most challenging dynamic and situation that there is in all of creation. The choices that we make individually and collectively have huge consequences. All the beings and all the worlds are watching. This is stuff I don't get into. You hear all this stuff on the periphery about ETs and people from the Pleiades and all of this. The entire cosmos is watching what's going on here. This is the main show that's going on. And the whole destiny of this universe and the divine plan hangs in the balance. When Michael released the cosmic intelligence into humanity, and he wasn't going to be able to give it support and direction and guidance within human evolution for another 2,160 years. He had to allow mankind to take this in with the forces of darkness and all their influence and not be able to do anything about it until his next regency, which is now. And what has happened is that this being, Ahriman, has taken the creative intelligence and distorted it into a totally soulless materialism. One of the main representations of this materialistic application of the creative intelligence is what we know of as our science. Science refuses to acknowledge a reality beyond the physical and the material. If you can't weigh it and measure it, it isn't real, it doesn't exist. They have negated the reality of the soul and the spirit. They have negated the foundation of all of life. The material is the form aspect in which soul and spirit incarnates, and I don't care if it's a galaxy or a tree or a human being. That's the form aspect. It's not the ultimate reality. Anybody who thinks that the physical reality is the ultimate reality subscribe to this materialistic viewpoint, which is the Ahrimanic. That's where atheism comes in and all kinds of other things. If we looked in parallel to the time of Alexander in Greek culture and civilization, we're going to see that we have developed a world culture, a global culture, a common currency, a common language, developed knowledge to incredible degrees, exploration, all of these things. But it's got this whole bias of materialism. Therefore, it distorts it. This is the situation. Michael has to wait till his next regency. He has to try to reclaim the cosmic intelligence for the light. And that's what he's doing now. And that's when you see all this alternative stuff coming up. Alternative science, alternative healing, everything alternative. The stuff that really, it doesn't hold power because the institutions are still established very much in the Ahrimanic power. We're seeing this reaction and this uplifting and this rising light, because that's very much what Michael is about. This rising light of consciousness, this rising light of awareness that, wait a minute, this materialistic viewpoint on life is very limited. It's very incomplete. It really isn't speaking truth. It doesn't really represent me or the world in a way that is satisfying or fulfilling or meaningful. There's got to be more.
This music is from the CD titled The Sea of Love by Hiram Titus. Welcome to CD 2 of 2 on The Spirit of the Times by Robert Ayres. This CD draws from two presentations of the same subject, so you may notice differences in tonality and volume. In drawing from these presentations, you'll notice occasional repetition of major topics. They were presented differently and provide exceptional additional information. Track 10 addresses the current U.S. economic crisis and stock market. It comes from Robert's August lecture, The Mystery of Love and Its Meaning in the World. Robert continues with the reclaiming of the cosmic intelligence.
Because of the criticalness of the giving in freedom, the cosmic intelligence to humanity, and knowing that we were living in the realm of darkness, and the forces of darkness were what prevailed to the degree that we really didn't have that guidance from the spiritual beings, the beings of light, that Ahriman would have his way, which he has. Michael's concern was so great, and his need to prepare for his next regency, which is now, was so great that he did something that he'd never done before. He created a school in the sun. When we talk about the sun in this regard, we want to understand the sun. We're not just talking about the physical sun. It's an outer physical manifestation of something that's inner. And when we talk about the sun, if we talk about the various dimensional realities, the sun represents the heaven worlds, or in the Vedic tradition, what is known as Devachan. As we had mentioned before, there's 7 subplanes to every cosmic plane. Well, there's 7 dimensional realities or 7 levels to heaven. I think we've all heard of the term seventh heaven. That is where Michael resides when he's not being regent. In that period of time between death and rebirth, when we are in the spiritual worlds and we are having these experiences and processing through all of what we need to in order to prepare for our next lifetime, then we enter the sun as part of this, because there's those realms way beyond the sun too. It's on our way back in preparation for a new lifetime, because we ascend to the midnight hour. And then as it's time for us to reincarnate, we begin the slow descending process through the dimensional realities, and we enter into the sun about midway in this process before we incarnate. Michael was collecting those souls or individualities that wanted to work with him, and he wanted to work with us in terms of his next regency, in terms of his next rulership here on earth, because he needed human beings and physical embodiment to work with in order to facilitate the reclaiming of the cosmic intelligence. It wasn't that he could just do it himself. He needed the cooperation and the conscious working with human beings. So he created in the sun, it's called a cultic school, the Michael School. It was a group of human beings that were preparing for their next incarnation that spent hundreds of years with Michael in terms of training and knowledge and preparation for us then incarnating in physical bodies during the 300-year rulership of Michael, that he could work with to facilitate the reclaiming of the cosmic intelligence. Most likely, many of you were in that school, or you wouldn't be attracted to coming to this class. This is about awakening. It's about recognition. It's about moving into your dharma or destiny and really realizing what's important and the deeper issues as to why you're here. Every single one of us, whether you realize it consciously or not, are here now on purpose, intentionally, as part of this whole process. You want to be very aware that Michael is waiting for you to wake up. And Michael is wanting to work with you, and you to be a vehicle and an instrument for him to be able to work through you to bring certain influences into the world in your own individual way within your own lives. Changes are not coming from top down. Don't look to the institutions. Don't look to the supposed leaders that this is where it's going to come from, because that isn't where it's going to come from. Those are the realms that are ruled by darkness. This is grassroots stuff. It's bottom up. It's you and me. This is how we reclaim the intelligence. It's not going to come from those realms. This is about awakening to who you are and why you're here. There is no accident. We talked about the challenges of this time. These have to do with the manifestations of the polarization of the conflicts between light and darkness and good and evil. And the rising light, because the light is rising, those of us that went through the 60s and beyond, things have changed. There's whole different viewpoints, whole different worldviews, whole different approaches, whole different values that are arising. The power structures don't want that. It's challenging them. The power structures are increasingly becoming dysfunctional. Look, that's what we've been talking about for years. These power structures are the power levers of darkness. We're going to find that what we have to go through is a process of increasing dysfunction and deterioration of the power structures and institutions of our society in order for the light to rise. It's a death and rebirth process. We are going to find then what is built on that is that which will then be of the light. As a result of the growth of materialism in human consciousness, as a result of the growth of this Ahrimanic influence in terms of human consciousness and culture, during this last 1,000 years, when people died, when they died and they went into the spiritual worlds, they took their darkness with them, of course. When you die and you go into the spiritual worlds, you take the sum total of that which you've done, good, bad, whatever. We're going to find that the effect of the intense materialism, this is intense materialism. You want to understand Ahriman's intention. He's trying to take over the earth, and he's trying to take over humanity and create his own kingdom and cut us off from the divine plan. He wants to trap souls and make them earthbound. He wants to create a world that he rules. It's all based in matter and materialism. And that's just a quick picture. We'll get into this more in future classes. It's important to understand. The influence of this Ahrimanic thinking and culture and utilization of the cosmic intelligence, as a person lives it, it permeates them, even their soul and the subtle bodies and their being. So when they drop the physical body and they go into the spiritual worlds, they take that sum total, whether it's light and darkness, and for all of us it's some mixture of the above, into the spiritual worlds. Well, there was such an onslaught of souls dying over the past 1,000 to 1,200 years that were so materialistically minded that when they cleansed and purified themselves, it dumped all of this darkness in the spiritual world. The light of the spiritual world became darker and darker and darker. We can talk about the etheric dimension, we can talk about the astral dimension, we can talk about the lower mental. We are going to find that these inner spiritual worlds got darker and darker and made it much more difficult for an individual to work effectively with their angel. That this darkness created such a vibration and density that mankind was losing touch with its messenger and with its links to home in the spiritual worlds. It was becoming a cosmic crisis. The second coming of the Christ, we want to be very, very clear, is not a physical event. All of these people that are talking about the second coming of the Christ as a physical event, or the Muslims that are talking about the Mahdi coming as a physical event, or as the Jews talking about the Messiah coming as a physical event, because you'll find the fundamentalist aspects of each one of these religions is looking for their Savior coming in a physical body. No, it's not happening. The second coming of the Christ is happening in the etheric dimension, that dimension that's one step inner, and it has to do with the necessity of us as individuals to turn within and connect with it as an inner spiritual experience. It is not an outer experience. The way that we do it is through the heart, that place that the Christ being has its greatest influence is through the heart. So we're talking 1933, second coming of the Christ. Anybody have any idea historically what was so significant in an outer political way in terms of 1933? Hitler came to power. Hitler was overlighted by Ahriman. The exact same time. You have to understand how these things work. It's like a chess game. The light makes a move, the darkness makes a move. The light makes a move, the darkness makes a move. The light makes a move, the darkness makes a move. And that's what's going on right now. What happened was, for the second coming of the Christ being in the etheric went through a second crucifixion and resurrection in the spiritual worlds because of the darkness, because of all the darkening of the world, of humanity bringing all its garbage from Ahriman and earthly life into the spiritual worlds. It darkened the spiritual worlds to where the Christ being went through a second crucifixion and resurrection. And it was at that time of the resurrection that then the second coming of the Christ started, and it was 1933. Okay, why is this connected with Michael? It's connected with Michael because he was the one, prior to his regency in 1879, in his battle in heaven with the dragon and the Ahrimanic host, that he cleared out all of this darkness from the spiritual world. This war from 1840 to 1879 in the spiritual world is extremely significant for our evolution. Michael cleared these dark beings out of the spiritual worlds, but where did they end up? He threw them down to earth. These beings that were basically astral beings or dark angels, Ahrimanic dark angels, whose realm had always been in the spiritual worlds, were actually thrown out of the spiritual worlds down to earth. This begins, if you know your history, but this gets into huge things. In 1879, these beings were thrown down. Okay. If you understand history, you're going to find beginning at that time is a time of great concentration of money and power. It's when the industrialists relate to the Industrial Revolution and the concentration of wealth in the banking system started accelerating in a way that had never been seen before. One of the things that we want to understand is that the being's name that was the head of the legions of the Ahrimanic hosts in the spiritual worlds, this being's name is Mammon. Mammon is the cosmic embodiment of greed. Greed had always been around. All these things had always been around. The centers of their being had not been manifest on earth in the physical. When Mammon got thrown down to the earth, we find an acceleration in the human soul, in the human consciousness in terms of greed. When we look at Wall Street and we look at the financial system and we look at the international banking system and we look at the very structure of our global economy and the financial system, you're going to find it is driven and ruled by human beings that are very much involved with these Ahrimanic beings and with Mammon. Even the crash we talked about is a concentration of money. It's impoverishing the rest of us. It's concentrating this money in the hands of a few. The other way that Mammon manifests, and accelerated significantly since 1879, is in bacteria and viruses. In the inner physical body, at a microbial level, we are under attack in a way that has never happened before in human evolution. One of the scary things was in the Wall Street Journal about a week or two ago. They've now identified a virus that they have no antibiotics for. It's being noted. It's been in India and England. There is no known way to fight this virus. There's no antibiotics. There's no way, and it has started to spread. They want to weaken us in a physical way, but also weaken us economically and otherwise. And it has to do with a very real plan of enslavement, quite frankly. It's the opposite of freedom. Think about your credit cards. Think about your mortgage. I can tell you, I worked in that business. There is a plan that is designed to enslave you, to make you become indentured servants. The very basis of our economic system. And we're going to find that it goes very much into this whole area that we are talking about, to just be able to identify that. Michael, before his regency in the spiritual worlds, cleared all these beings out so that we now can, again, have our conscious personal relationship with our angel, can have our conscious personal relationship with the Christ. What is the difference between the first coming of the Christ and the second coming of the Christ? Huge. In the first coming of the Christ, first of all, he was in a physical body in a backwater of the Roman Empire, where a handful of people had the opportunity to have some contact with him. By the way, just to give you an idea about how huge the Christ event is from a cosmic standpoint, for the apostles, it took them a period of being in the sun, in the spiritual worlds after they died, 300 years in the sun with Michael, before they had the full understanding of what they had participated in when they were in their physical bodies at the Christ event, as being disciples or apostles of the Christ. We have given you just the tiniest little bit of understanding of how significant this is. This is for the entire cosmos. It isn't just for humanity. This is the placing on our earth of the ultimate light and the ultimate darkness. We as human beings have to choose between the two. We have free will choice. For you to have freedom, you have to have choice. just having no choice and all there is goodness, you're going to find that relatively that's a weak goodness because you have no choice. To the degree that you have a choice between evil or goodness and you choose goodness, and of course, every day, every single one of us is making choices. We need to become very conscious. Every choice you make is a voting for the light or the darkness. And it is true. You have your guardian angel here on your right side, but there's also a dark angel over here on your left side. And they're both metaphorically whispering in your ear, so that we are being influenced in both ways. The thing is, the angels and the beings of light play by the rules, which is they have to honor our free will choice. The darkness doesn't honor that. It controls and manipulates. And one of the things it's done, literally, is invade the human blood and the human nervous system. And it gets back to some of this about the viruses. How do they influence? Well, they influence in many ways, but they actually enter into our physical bodies. And they influence us in that way. So do the beings of light. Again, ultimately, it's our choice. These influences are here. We're surrounded by this push-pull that's going on all of the time. We are the arbiters of our own life. We are the captain of our own ship. We are the decision maker. It is up to us the choices that we make. We are the fulcrum. In terms of Earth and human evolution, this we'll get into more later, cosmic evolution. What is happening here on Earth in terms of human evolution is the tipping point for the entire creation. The drama that is going on here is not just of earthly importance. The gods and the beings of all worlds have their attention in terms of what's going on here. We need to wake up. We need to understand what's going on. There's a lot of control and manipulation that's going on that most people don't even see. Speaking of Michael, at the present time, it is the manifesting of this consciousness of light. He is the being of freedom. And I don't mean just phrase-mongering. I don't mean empty phrases, empty slogans. A lot of that is very ironic. This abstraction. I mean genuine, true freedom. And it isn't so much in the political sphere, and it isn't what you vote for online, and it isn't what particular consumer product you buy off the shelf. One of the things you want to understand about Ahriman is that the business world and the political world and this whole culture that we have created want to give you lots of choices that you'll think that you're free. And you're not. Because your thinking and your worldview and your consciousness has been manipulated and limited in a materialistic way that you don't even see the light. And they want you to think you're free by giving you a bunch of material choices. That's not freedom. That's not the freedom we're talking about. This is the freedom that is unbounded, of all possibilities, of total transcendence, of that which is blossoming and flowering into the pure light and the pure consciousness that is your true nature that dwells within you. That was that whole process. We talked about the cosmic intelligence descending from the sun. Within each and every one of us, that cosmic intelligence resides within you. What are we doing with it? Most are, watching television. One of the things about the Roman Empire. The basic principle of how the emperors of Rome ruled the Roman Empire is bread in circuses. Fill their stomachs and entertain them. And they won't care what we do with their world. That's what we're doing now. That's what's going on. Look at the distractions everywhere. So we don't really see what's going on. And keep us satisfied to a point that we don't get upset or really look for something that's better. And to the degree that we think that the material reality is the only reality, must be pretty good. To the degree we have an awareness that there's more to life than just this physical reality and accumulating material goods, then you're a threat. One of the things that's very important to put this in perspective, there's 9 spiritual hierarchies above us. The angels and the archangels and the archive form what is the 3rd spiritual hierarchy. It's the aspect of wisdom of this divine being. In Christian terminology is known as the Holy Spirit. Then there's the Kyriates, the Dynamis, and the Exousiae. And these are the beings of love. They are the next higher level. And then there's the Seraphim and the Cherubim and the thrones. And these are the beings of will. will, love, and wisdom, or the Trinity as it is even expressed as we know it. And it relates to the threefoldness of our own being. Those are 9 spiritual hierarchies we just mentioned. We want you to understand that humanity forms the 10th spiritual hierarchy. And it is the process of our claiming and evolving into this spiritual hierarchy, and I mean in terms of the whole cosmos, that what humanity is known as in the spiritual cosmos is the 10th spiritual hierarchy of freedom and love. It has to do that we, just as we've said before, there's love in creation and there's freedom in creation, but not to the degree that is going to be unfolded within human evolution. What is unfolded in terms of freedom and love within human evolution will be the supreme expression of it in the cosmos. It's because it has been developed in the most difficult, most challenging, most dark realm in all of creation. Meeting the intensity and strength of that freedom and the intensity and strength of that love is greater than anything else in the cosmos, because none of these other spiritual life waves of beings have had any experience in physicality or materiality. They have not gone through what we go through. We have gone through and we're going through. As a result, you will find that the more challenging the test, the stronger that one becomes. That's what mastership is about. A master means that one has mastered life, and they've mastered themselves in the deepest sense of the term. And it means there's nothing in the universe that life can throw at us that we can't handle, that we cannot master. Yeah, we've got a ways to go. We will find that this time with Michael and the rising of the light and the second coming of the Christ, these are the events that you consciously chose. You don't remember it now. But you consciously chose to incarnate now to be part of this, because during the times of greatest challenge are the times of greatest opportunity. Crisis is opportunity. This is a time of extreme crisis. There was a war in heaven, or in the spiritual worlds, and specifically the astral dimension. It had to do with the Ahrimanic beings. They tried to storm heaven. They tried to basically take over, and this is a topic for another time, but they wanted to take control of the whole reproductive part of heredity and genetics, and that's one of the things you want to understand about some of the stuff that's going on in terms of science. They wanted to try to limit humanity's evolution by controlling the genetic and hereditary influences of the physical body. When we talk about genetics and these kind of things, it just relates to the physical vehicle. It does not relate to the soul or the spirit that indwells it, but to the degree that we, as a soul or a spirit, cannot make this physical vehicle function in terms of the light, then we're trapped. We're stuck. We can't evolve. We need a physical instrument that corresponds with the abilities in consciousness that indwell it, or we've got a terrible situation. Okay, there was a battle between Michael and Ahriman, Michael's hosts and Ahriman's hosts in the astral dimension. The war began in 1840 and continued to 1879, and it wasn't completed until 1879. Ahriman and his hosts lost. They were all thrown down to the earth. So guess what, folks? These beings that weren't in the earth before, they were in the spiritual worlds, are now here in the earth. They were cleared out of the spiritual world in order to facilitate our ability to connect with the Christ event, the second coming of the Christ, and also to connect with our angels and really be able to develop our consciousness in a spiritual way and open up to spiritual experiences in the spiritual world. Now we got these guys right here, and they're not in physical form. They are dark angels. They are dark beings, and they have accelerated and intensified the materialism since 1879. For those of you who know history, when we start looking at 1879 forward, we see the coalescing of the international banking system, the rise of the tycoons, this heavy concentration of power through money. The leader of these beings' name that got thrown down to the earth, this being's name is Mammon. Mammon embodies, as a spiritual being, that dark principle of greed. If we look and understand, we will see an intensification of greed since this time of 1879. It's not that it didn't exist before, of course it did. When we talk about these things, we're talking about a very intense acceleration or intensification of these influences within human consciousness and human culture and human civilization. And yes, it was necessary to clear out the spiritual world, and Michael had to do that in order to even have a chance at reclaiming the cosmic intelligence in terms of human evolution because we had to have the ability to connect with the Christ. We had to have the ability to connect with our angels. We had to have the ability to connect with the archangels. But also know that Michael and his hosts are right here now also. What I mean by right here now, I mean the etheric. The physical is this dimension we're very aware of. That dimensional reality that is next inner from the physical is the etheric. And it's called the vital or the life, and we're not going to get into it right now, but it's a whole dimensional reality. It's very solar in nature. When we talk about prana and chi, these are forces of the etheric dimension. When we talk about acupuncture and working with meridians, we are talking about that solar energy. It's not of this earth, it's from the sun. And we get it from our environment. And if we don't get it, it affects us. So here we have a darkening and intensification, but now we could say, in our Western terminology, the cavalry is here. In terms of Michael and his host, because he is a warrior being. He is a warrior being. And that's one of the things to understand in terms of trying to have a personal relationship with Michael. He has an aversion, and it isn't just an aversion. For principle, he cannot become connected with physical reality or the earthly reality because of his nature. Also, because of what he's dealing with, you're going to find Michael's demeanor is rather stern. He's not warm and fuzzy. He's here to do business. And he's recruiting and working with those people who are on his side. And some of you, or maybe all of you, were part of his school in the sun. And you signed up. And he is here now under very challenging circumstances. When we look at this battle in heaven, the completion of that in 1879 was when he then started his regency in terms of this 300-year period of his rulership. And it's also when he got elevated to the status of an archai as a result of this, because this was a big deal. There's an example right there. All the things you've heard about Michael and the dragon. Ahriman is the dragon. Michael is Michael. He's the warrior. And there's all kinds of levels we can talk about that on. We can talk about that in terms of the higher spiritual self and the lower material self. We can talk about it from the standpoint cosmically of exactly what's represented. You're going to find the myths or the traditions, the spiritual traditions of every culture and civilization in humanity has the equivalent of Michael and the dragon. And what we talk about in terms of this war in heaven from 1840 to 1879 is something that has been repeated many times in the past. Different issues, different situations, but where the darkness and the light have battled, and I mean as real beings and as forces in the spiritual worlds, Michael has always been the victor, to where he has been able to hold off the darkness from invading the realms of light or the higher spiritual worlds. And they try to storm heaven periodically. And what they wanted to do this last time was take over this very esoteric, powerful stuff related to human heredity and trap human beings in physical bodies and limit our ability to evolve into higher consciousness. This thing of greed, we look at Wall Street and we look at the bailouts and we look at the complete bust of the financial system. And by the way, for those of you who don't know me, I spent 25 years in investment banking international. So I know a lot about money, and I work from the top, and I know how dark it is, and I know what goes on, and I know how corrupt it is. I know this stuff. That's why I walked away. I felt literally like I was losing my soul, even though I was incredibly successful from a financial standpoint. These are the forces that are running the world, and these are directly related to Ahriman and this being Mammon. Additionally, one of the other primary ways that's extremely relevant to us at the present time of the manifestations of these Ahrimanic beings of darkness in our physical world is that they are what's behind bacteria and viruses. You're going to see this explosion of bacteria and viruses, epidemics. Not that there weren't epidemics before. You're going to see these beings, because they are beings, evolving. If we get into viruses and bacteria, it goes into the processes of decomposition of the physical body that relate to the principles of death that Ahriman rules. We could go into all of the legitimate areas that Ahriman rules. These beings of darkness don't want to stay within the boundaries that are the legitimate realm. When we look at this present time, since 1879, Michael is now the regent. He is now in the process of trying to reclaim the cosmic intelligence and reclaim that in terms of each one of us individually. Things are trickier now. Back during his last regency, evolution automatically happened to us through the blood, unconsciously. Things have changed. Evolution does not happen to you anymore. You must have it happen to you yourself. You must evolve yourself. You must evolve your own consciousness. That's the only way Michael can work with you. That's the only way you can work with Michael. If you have not made a commitment or you haven't consciously moved your life in terms of values and priorities and directions and actions, in terms of growing yourself and your consciousness and becoming a better person, then you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. This is the moment of truth. This is the time of choice. This particular lifetime for you, at this point evolutionarily, the masters would say, yes, we still have lots of opportunities. If we really screw up and make a lot of bad decisions in this lifetime, we still got plenty of opportunities, many lifetimes in the future to correct it. This particular lifetime is probably the most significant lifetime you've ever lived because the potential influence it will have on your future incarnations is huge. What is beginning to happen? Just as you see in the world, there's beginning to be a separation and a polarization. This is happening spiritually in human evolution also. It becomes very critical and important. You're very conscious of the choices that you make. Every time you make a choice, you're voting for the light or the darkness, the right or the wrong. And this is karma. What goes around comes around. What you put out there comes back to you. When we start looking at this from a very practical standpoint, it's where we've got to clean up our act and get clear about what we're doing and why we're here and what our values are. And making a commitment and putting it into action. It isn't just about you. Of course it's about you. It's about the whole world and it's about the whole cosmos. Things are on the line. Yeah, there's more time, there's more opportunity, and we'll have the opportunity to work from the spiritual worlds. Just to give you an idea, on average, and for a lot of you, because many of you were in Michael's school in the sun and you spent many hundreds of years there, the average time, and I just mean averages, because averages really don't tell us a lot, but they give us a certain understanding. The average time between lifetimes that we spend in the spiritual worlds preparing for our next incarnation is 500 years. Meaning, when we look at the life that we are living, if you understood the preparation and work that you have done in the spiritual worlds preparing for this lifetime, it would absolutely boggle your mind. And that's stuff that we will get into in future classes. Again, you have to work, and you do work, with all of the different spiritual hierarchies in developing your bodies and your physiology and your karma and your life plan and the people you're going to incarnate with and the country you're going to incarnate with and the language that's going to be most expressive of your soul quality. Just to give you an idea, if you think births and who your children are accidents, or who your parents are accidents, minimally, in the spiritual world, you are working with the family lineage that you are going to be born into 3 generations prior to your birth. Because it relates to this whole thing of having the design of a physical body that will be the vehicle for your soul and spirit that is appropriate and fitting and gives you the tools you need to express the consciousness that you embody. When we get into this, it's very far out, but it's very real. I spent 15 years with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi as a teacher and being in charge of the TM movement. One of the things his master said to him, Swami Brahmananda Saraswati, who was an enlightened master of great renown, to give you an idea, this individual was sitting out in the jungles of India by himself in meditation, and for 25 miles around, all the animals, whether they were leopards or deer, were in total harmony. Everything in nature, in his whole environment, was in total harmony. There was no killing, there was no death. One of the things that Maharishi's master, Swami Brahmananda Saraswati, told him, basically said, most people value their lives as if it was a can of spinach, which is just such a statement, because when you look at the way people live their lives, what they value, what they do, what they think their life is about, what is important to them, they're lost. There's many ways we could describe it. They don't have a clue about what's really going on. and why they're here and all the work they put in and what the possibilities and opportunities that they have presented to them every day that they don't see and they don't take advantage of. And we don't want to be that. I guarantee you every single day the universe and life are presenting you opportunities, but you have to awaken to them. And that's one of the things that Michael is the awakener. Part of the thing about materialism, you want to know and understand that one of the principles they use is putting you to sleep. Look at our world. Total distraction in terms of what is really going on. You've got to wake up. You've got to see what is going on. You've got to step up. You've got to do what you came here to do. You are each a center of influence. This is the time of the light. The light is rising. We want to be very, 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 very clear. When we look at the news at night and we look at the headlines of the newspapers, we could say the whole world is going to hell in a handbasket. In a certain respect, it is. It's because the light is rising and consciousness is rising, and the darkness does not want that consciousness to rise, that it is creating all these distractions and problems and blockages and challenges. You want to understand that there's a purpose and intention behind all this crisis, and it is to distract you from the real event which is going on in here. This is about connecting with your higher spiritual self. The Christ being is your higher spiritual self. It embodies the cosmic consciousness. It is that which is your ultimate reality. It is the second coming of the Christ. It's an inner event. It's not an outer event. These people that are talking about a physical second coming are deluded. That is the darkness. When we start getting into religion, we could talk about Wall Street and finance and banks. We can also talk about it in terms of religion and every other thing from government, medicine. We could go on and on. We need to understand and be able to see things as they truly are, to be able to discern and discriminate and be seeing what is of the light and what is of the darkness, because if you don't, you're going to be sucked in. One of the things you want to understand about the darkness, one of the names of this being, Ahriman, is the liar. All lying and cheating and stealing is based upon the energy and consciousness of this being. If you don't know the truth, you're going to be off. You're not going to find your way. And I'll just use this as an example. In the CIA, this is a principle they use, and it's a principle that the being of darkness uses, and all the beings of darkness use, of disinformation. We'll give you 85% truth, 15% falsehood. You're going to swallow the whole thing, and the 15% falsehood is going to be such it throws you off enough, you're going to miss the target. That's what's going on all around us. It takes somebody very alert, very awake, discerning and discriminating, and understanding what's going on to be able to find our way through this mess, this darkness. This culture is based in darkness. This has been 1,200 years of Ahrimanic influence on human intelligence and culture and civilization. We have to see it for what it is. We are in the time of the rising of the light. The dawning of a new day is happening. We cannot be distracted and confused and get caught up in the drama to the degree that we take our attention off what is truly important and truly happening, which is the expansion of consciousness and the unfolding of the light of the Spirit. This is a totally unique time. Michael's regency, second coming of the Christ. Michael is always the emissary of the Christ. And he's here once every 2,160 years, or an age. And it's now. I guarantee you it was no accident you were born now. You chose to be here and be part of this. Greater the crisis, the greater the opportunity spiritually. I speak from personal experience, but also from that which you know and also is reflected to the degree that you've been paying attention and you've stepped on the path. You're growing awareness of people's expanding awareness and growing of consciousness. It's happening all around. A lot of people don't even understand what it is they're experiencing. Their quality of life is changing. Their quality of consciousness is changing. It's expanding. It's becoming enlightened. People are beginning to seek things out. They're wanting to know. They're wanting to understand. They're wanting to improve themselves. They're wanting to see through this and understand what's going on. You have to make an effort. It is work to find your way in this world, in this time. you've got great allies. You've got Michael, you've got your angel, you've got the Michaelic hosts. This is that time. Tonight is an overview. And that's to give us a perspective and a structure from which to go more deeply into this in future classes. One of the things that I want to remind you that is so beautiful, and it becomes very important for you to understand, we as human beings embody what the cosmos knows, what is known throughout the spiritual worlds and the spiritual cosmos of the universe, that we are the 10th spiritual hierarchy. We are in the process of taking our place within the cosmos, and it requires us following along the path that's been designed for us by the beings of light, and overcoming the obstacles and challenges of the beings of darkness, which makes us that much stronger and that much more intelligent, and our consciousness that much stronger, so that we find that the end result of human evolution is such that humanity, it goes into deep mysteries that the Alpha and the Omega, the last will become first. And in a certain respect, you could look at ourselves and say, we're at the lowest level of creation in the physical realm, and this dense material place, and none of these other beings have soiled their being by contacting or becoming involved with this very dark place. We'll find by taking it into ourselves and transmuting it and transforming it and turning it into light, another way of understanding it is, and this is quite real, is that every one of these beings of darkness, in the process of our own transmutation and transformation, we turn back into their true nature of beings of light. We allow the entire creation to reclaim its true nature, and it's through us, it's through humanity. Humanity is the agency of the divine, of transmuting and transforming darkness into light. And we can talk about it on all kinds of different levels. To understand it for the cosmos, it is actually to transform the very principle and beingness of evil and darkness into goodness and light through our own process of evolution and transformation. By taking on a physical body, you take on darkness. When you eat every day and breathe every day and drink every day, you are taking into yourself these principles that must be alchemically transmuted. When we talk about the principle of death, what happens to your physical body? Principle of entropy of physics, create a system, begins to disintegrate and die and degenerate. You have to keep feeding it life force in order to keep it alive and going. We're going to find we all die. And it's the nature of the physical of death. It's one of the realities, and Ahriman rules the principle of death. What was represented to us in terms of the resurrection is exactly what each and every one of us will go through from the standpoint of transmuting this physical body back into a diamond body of light. That is what the resurrection body is. What is this? This is a carbon-based body. Learned that from Star Trek. When we transmute carbon, what does it become? Diamond. Under the greatest heat and pressure. Can you relate? Over long periods of time, we become a diamond. Diamond is the hardest element of the mineral kingdom. The mineral kingdom is the lowest kingdom. We're going to find the diamond is the perfection. To understand it in a deeper sense, the physical dimension of reality is a mirror back to the Supreme Being. It sees itself in physical matter. When we refine physical matter to that of diamond, it's a perfect mirror. And we discover who we are, and it also discovers who it is, because it is in this eternal process of self-discovery through its creative expression. And we are the microcosm of the macrocosm, and what we realize is that we are one with this being. And that consciousness, then what happens is the lowest becomes the highest, the last becomes the first. And that's what the Christ was referring to in many different ways, is that which is at the lowest becomes at the right hand of God, because we are the agency to be the conscious co-creators and the completion of the divine plan. It cannot be completed without humanity achieving its goal, because we are to create heaven on earth. We are to create the divine paradigms and manifest them in physical matter through this whole process of transmuting darkness into light. We are to create that divine design of the highest level and manifest it at the lowest level and complete the whole process and intention of creation. Kabbalistically, if you look at the tree of life, Yesod, the 10th Malkut, the 10th Sephirat, which we are the 10th spiritual hierarchy, is the fruit of the tree. It is that which all the spiritual hierarchies and every level of creation feed into. It's just like a tree. The end result of a plant is the flower and the fruit. And the earth is that which is the fruit of the entire creation. And humanity is the agency of the manifesting of this fruit. The point that I want to make is that we are the 10th spiritual hierarchy, which cosmically is the hierarchy of freedom and love. As we complete and fulfill our destiny, everything on this earth, and every person, but every leaf and rock and flower and cloud, will radiate in the most intense manner love and freedom. And it's not that love and freedom do not exist within creation, but they will never exist to the degree of intensity of perfection as what we are destined to unfold, because it is being done in the most trying and challenging of all circumstances in all of creation. And so the end result is the ultimate. If you want to know your destiny, it's growing and increasing freedom and increasing love. And those go way beyond what your understanding of those words are at the present time. What's going on out there is what we've been predicting and talking about for the last 2 years. This is phase 2 of the meltdown. It's something that we've been expecting and anticipating. There's no way to really avoid it. There has to be a moment of truth in terms of the debt, whether we talk about the sovereign debt of Europe, whether we talk about the debt in the United States. The banking and financial system globally is precarious. The market is finally beginning to recognize it. We're seeing the kinds of things that we're seeing. We've been talking about the fall, and we even talked about the end of August. It's happening a little bit sooner. And there still could be a rally into the fall, swinging back up. But when we get into October and we get beyond into 2012, it's going to be very, very messy, and you're not going to want to be in the stock market. It's too early to be in the bond market because interest rates are going to be rising. You can lose as much money in the bond market as the stock market. There's no place for interest rates to go but up. That's what's happening in Europe. In the U.S., as risk is perceived to be greater, there's going to be a greater demand for yield for people who are loaning money. So you're going to see interest rates go up. Gold and silver is still a play. That's part of what some people were asking before class. Yeah, it's crazy and outrageous when you look at the prices, but to give you an idea, when we looked at the top of the gold market, specifically in 79 and 80, when we had a similar kind of situation, if we took the price of gold of 1979 and 80 and translate it to present day in terms of inflation-adjusted pricing, gold would be over $3,000 an ounce. That's just inflation-adjusted. In the Wall Street Journal 2 or 3 days ago, Goldman Sachs was saying by the end of the year they expected $2,500 gold, $2,500 an ounce. JP Morgan was saying about 1760. So obviously there's a big difference there, but they're not talking about it going down significantly. And we can ask, why is everyone running to gold? Well, first of all, there aren't very many other interesting investment opportunities out there at the present time to put one's money. The second is it shows the degree of concern about the financial system. Gold and silver are basically insurance against the dollar completely going devalued, and understanding that the dollar is the reserve currency of the world and international transactions take place in the dollar. Then we have the actual medium that is key to all financial transactions. And there is real concern about our government being able to pay our debts, Italy's ability to pay its debts, Spain's ability to pay its debts, Ireland's ability to pay its debts, Greece. We experience this as individuals, whether it's corporate or whether it's government. If we build up a huge amount of debt, say we've gone out on a spending spree with our credit cards, and then we lose our job or our job is downgraded so we don't have the same amount of income, does that affect our ability to pay off our debts? You bet it does. Well, with a shrinking economy and a recession or depression economy, it means the governments have less tax revenue to pay off existing debt, let alone take on new debt. Then there becomes a real concern in terms of whether the government actually has the ability to pay off its debts. And when there's the concern about whether the government has the ability to pay off its debts, then there's going to be people running for the exits because we're talking about bankruptcy, talking about default. We almost defaulted just through the political shenanigans, whatever, a week or 2 weeks ago. That's one of the things that has shaken the confidence of the world. If our own politicians can't come together on a basic issue of continuing the financial activity of the government, then people lose faith in our ability to deal with the difficult financial problems and issues that we are facing. And let's be really honest, our finances as a country are a mess. And if we don't have the leadership and we don't have a plan to really get on top of it, then there's very real reason why the market should be scared. And that's where we're at. And the reality is that it's going to take some hard choices and a long time for us to get our financial house in order. And as a result, people are not confident about the future, and the markets are not confident about the future, and that's why these things are happening. That was a quick thing because it's definitely on most people's minds, and it's very much at the top of the news. Pushing that aside, the Foundation Stone meditation was received by Rudolf Steiner, an initiate and an enlightened master, back in 1925 from Archangel Michael and the Christ as that mantra. This is a mantra or power that has to do with aligning you with Michael and the Christ. This is something that I would be recommending that you read in the morning when you get up and in the evening when you go to bed. In the evening you go to bed, it prepares you and aligns you for going into the spiritual worlds. When you go to sleep, in a way that you connect with the beings of light. When you wake up in the morning and you read it, it aligns you in a way with the spiritual worlds that facilitates and supports you going through your daily activity. This is powerful, and if you want something that is current, that is directly related to Michael's regency, and directly related to the unfoldment of the Christ consciousness, which is the rising light that we've been referring to here, then I recommend you read it. This is something we'll get into more in future classes of understanding this. At this point, it may seem something of an enigma. Whether you understand it or not, it still works. It's nice. It's like a powerful mantra.
The Foundation Stone meditation will be found on the following track. It's there for ease of access to use for your daily meditations. Audio recording of this lecture was done by Brad Barnett. Audio editing and production by Thomas Dienema, foodforthespirit.net. Music from the CD titled The Sea of Love by Hiram Titus, hiramtitus.net. Robert Ayres can be reached through his website, astrologicalalchemy.com.
And he says, warm and fuzzy. Okay, let's see what warm and fuzzy is. Soul of man, thou livest in the limbs which bear thee through the world of space into the ocean being of the spirit. Practice spirit recollection in depths of soul, where in the wielding world creator life, thine own eye comes to being within the eye of God. Then in the all-world being of man, thou wilt truly live. For the Father Spirit of the heights holds sway in depths of worlds begetting life. Seraphim, cherubim, thrones, spirits of strength, let there ring out from the heights what in the depths is echoed, speaking, Ex Deo nascimur, from God mankind has being. The elemental spirits hear it, in east and west and north and south. May human beings hear it. Soul of man, thou livest in the beat of heart and lung, which leads thee through the rhythmic tides of time into the feeling of thine own soul being. Practice spirit mindfulness in balance of the soul, where the surging deeds of the world's becoming do thine own eye unite unto the eye of the world. Then mid the weaving of the soul of man, thou wilt truly feel. For the Christ will in the encircling round hold sway, in rhythms of worlds blessing the soul. Curiosities, dynamis, exousiae, spirits of light, let there be fired from the east what through the west is formed, speaking, in Christo morimur, in Christ death becomes life. The elemental spirits hear it in east and west and north and south. May human beings hear it. Soul of man, thou livest in the resting head, which from the ground of the eternal opens to thee the thoughts of worlds. Practice spirit vision in quietness of thought, where the eternal aims of God's world being's light on thine own eye bestow for thy free willing. Then from the ground of the spirit of man thou wilt truly think. For the Spirit's universal thoughts hold sway in the being of all worlds, beseeching light. Archai, Archangeloi, Angeloi, spirits of soul, let there be prayed in the depths what from the heights is answered, speaking, per spiritum sanctum reviviscimus. In the Spirit's universal thoughts, the soul awakens. The elemental spirits hear it in east and west and north and south. May human beings hear it. At the turning point of time, the spirit light of the world entered the stream of earthly being. Darkness of night had held its sway. Day radiant light poured into the souls of men. Light that gives warmth to simple shepherds' hearts. Light that enlightens the wise heads of kings. O light divine, O Son of Christ, warm thou our hearts, enlighten thou our heads, that good may become what from our hearts we would found, and from our heads direct with single purpose. whole creation, the spiritual sun that is the basis and foundation for the whole creation. The Christ being had been descending through the dimensional realities of creation, through vast periods of time, until it actually entered the sun, our sun. And the first person, human being, who actually saw this was Zoroaster. And this was in the second post-Atlantean epoch, that Persian post-Atlantean epoch. And the name Ahura Mazda means that one in the aura of the sun. And it was Ahura Mazda that Zoroaster saw. And he actually saw the process of the Christ being entering into our physical sun